Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Ever catch yourself scrolling endlessly through social media?
You should stop, but those notifications just keep calling your name.
Yeah.
You're definitely not alone. Today, we're going deep on the addictive nature of social media, using three really eye-opening articles to guide us.
And joining us to help us navigate this digital jungle is our expert in tech and psychology. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here. Though I will admit I made sure to turn off my notifications before we started.
Wouldn't want to become an example myself, right?
I hear that. Okay, so our first article, how social media and AI hijack your brain. Doesn't pull any punches, does it?
I mean, the title alone sounds like a warning label.
Right, but that intensity is what makes this article so fascinating.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just saying, hey, social media can be addictive, and dives into the how.
We're talking about tech companies deliberately engineering these platforms to tap into our brain chemistry.
Okay, so how about the attention economy? The article mentions that, and honestly, it sounds kind of ominous. Like, what does that even mean for us as users?
It's a great question, and it gets to the core of how these platforms make money. Think of it this way. Every minute you spend scrolling is a minute you're consuming content, and more importantly, ads.
Our attention, yours and mine, it's the currency these platforms trade on. The more they can capture it, the more valuable they become.
And to capture that attention? Well, that's where the sneaky psychology comes in.
Sneaky psychology, huh? You're going to have to elaborate on that.
You got it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those seemingly harmless features we encounter every time we open these apps. Think about things like infinite scroll, that never-ending feed that keeps you hooked, always promising something new.
Or how about those perfectly timed likes and notifications that pop up just as you're about to log off? These aren't accidental features. They're carefully designed mechanisms that exploit our brain's reward system, specifically by triggering the release of dopamine.
Dopamine, that's the feel-good chemical, right?
Exactly. And our brains are wired to seek out activities that release dopamine. Every time we get a notification, see a like on our post, or discover a funny video, our brains get a little hit of that feel-good chemical, and we're conditioned to crave more. The problem is it creates a cycle where we become increasingly reliant on these platforms for those dopamine hits, even if it comes at the expense of our time, our focus, or even our well-being.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, but is it really that manipulative? I mean, I like getting likes on my posts, who doesn't? But I wouldn't say I'm addicted.
It's subtle, right? And look, it's not about demonizing all social media. These platforms can be great for connecting with people, sharing experiences, building communities.
Yeah.
But the key takeaway here is awareness
Awareness of...
of how these platforms are designed. Think about it. Those likes, they're not just a measure of popularity. They're a form of feedback designed to keep us engaged. And remember how we talked about those algorithms? They take all that data, what we click on, how long we watch, who we interact with, and use it to create a personalized experience for each of us.
It's like that thing with my friend Max. He's constantly clicking on those cute animal videos, and guess what? His entire feed is now nothing but fluffy kittens and playful puppies.
Exactly.
Hey.
And that's where things get really interesting and maybe a little concerning, because these personalized experiences can start to shape our perception of the world around us.
So are you saying that our social media feeds are basically curated echo chambers?
That's the idea, and it's something both how social media and AI hijack your brain and the dopamine trap and social media prison touch on. Imagine for a second that you're only ever exposed to information that confirms your existing beliefs. You see it every day as you scroll through your feeds, people who share your values, news sources that reinforce your worldview.
I mean, that sounds kind of comforting, doesn't it? Like being surrounded by people who get you.
It's human nature to gravitate towards the familiar and comfortable, but there's a flip side to that. When we're constantly bombarded with information that confirms our biases, it can create blind spots. We might start to think that our perspective is the only perspective, which can make it difficult to understand and empathize with those who see the world differently.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. It's not just about cat videos anymore, is it?
Exactly. This has real-world consequences. Remember back in 2016 when it seemed like everyone had a completely different take on what was happening in the world politically speaking? The Dopamine Trap article talks about how people on opposite sides of the political spectrum were seeing completely different news stories and information about the election, all because of how their social media feeds were curated.
That reminds me of this one example in the article about two friends who had totally different Facebook experiences during that time. One was convinced of one outcome, the other the opposite, and it all came down to who their friends were and what was showing up in their feeds. It really highlights how these personalized feeds can create such different realities.
It's wild, isn't it? And it can have a polarizing effect. When we're only exposed to one side of the story, it's easy to become more entrenched in our own beliefs,
Mm.
even if those beliefs are based on incomplete or biased information. It's like everyone's living in their own little information bubble, and those bubbles don't always interact in healthy ways.
So it's more than just dopamine trap, then it's an information trap too.
It's a good way to put it. And it raises some important questions about the future of news-critical thinking and even civil discourse.
It really makes you think about how these seemingly separate online worlds are playing out in the real world, right? Like, what's the cost of all this? And I don't mean in dollars and cents.
Although someone's making money off all those clicks.
Right? But seriously, when we talk about free platforms, like, what are we actually giving up for the convenience of this curated experience? That's the big question, isn't it? How social media and AI hijack your brain. And that other one, Trapped, what was it called again?
Trapped, the secret ways social media is built to be addictive.
Yeah, that's the one. They both go deep on this whole idea of free. And honestly, it's a little unsettling because
Yeah.
we're not just talking about seeing a few targeted ads here and there.
No, it's bigger than that, right?
Way bigger. It's like that saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And in this case, the product is our data. Every scroll, every comment, every article we read, it all gets packaged up and sold.
So we become the product. Okay,
Yeah.
but what does that actually mean? Like, paint me a picture. What are they doing with all this data they're collecting?
Think of it this way. They're building these incredibly detailed profiles on each of us, like digital dossiers based on our online behavior. It's not just what we buy or what websites we visit. We're talking about our interests, our values, our political leanings, even our deepest fears and insecurities.
It's kind of creepy when you put it like that.
Yeah, a little creepy,
Often.
but also incredibly valuable to advertisers and marketers.
Yeah.
They can target us with incredible precision. And because these platforms are so good at keeping us hooked, we're more likely to engage with those ads than we would be otherwise.
So what can we do about it? I mean, it feels like we're kind of stuck in this system once we're plugged in.
I wouldn't say we're completely powerless. All three articles actually offer some good advice for taking back some control. Trapped, especially one of the simplest things, disable those notifications.
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking about that. It's like those little red badges are designed to trigger a mini anxiety attack every time we see one. Out of sight, out of mind.
Seriously, I did a digital detox a while back. No phone, no social media, nothing. It was amazing.
I actually started reading real books again. Can you believe it?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've been trying to be more intentional about my phone use too, like putting it in another room when I'm working or spending time with family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or how about this one? Designate certain devices for certain activities, like no social media on your work computer. That way you're not even tempted.
Love it. It's all about setting those boundaries, right? Because let's face it, these platforms are designed to be addictive. They want our attention and they're really good at getting it.
It's true. But knowing what we know now about how these algorithms work and how they're designed to keep us hooked, it gives us a little more power to fight back.
Exactly. Awareness is key.
Well said. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the dopamine trap of social media. Thanks to you for breaking it all down for us.
It's been a pleasure. As always, a fascinating conversation.
And to everyone listening, a huge thank you for joining us. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to those articles we talked about. And until next time, stay curious.